Hello, I am David Roylance. I'm a multiple Amazon best-selling author. I've been named as one of the top 40 influencers for women in the banking space by Women in Banking and Finance. And I am the co-founder of Speak to Shine International. And via Speak to Shine International, that's why I have chosen to create this gratis training for you. Now, how come I would do a free training for you? Well, I typically help my clients, who are predominantly women, get a 40% income increase, whether it be a promotion if they're an employee, or 40% increase in their turnover if they're an entrepreneur. I'm on a mission, which is to help 1,000 people have that kind of result in their life. Now, I only have a limited amount of capacity. There are only a number of hours in the week, right, for everyone? So how do I help make that 1,000 happen? I do it by giving you this free training on learning how to be super confident. That's what we're going to do over these next 25 minutes. I'm going to share with you some of the techniques that I use with my clients, some of the stories from my clients who've had amazing results as a result of using the techniques that I've taught them that I'm going to share with you today. So, I'm going to talk about posture, I'm going to talk about voice, and I'm going to talk about energy. And those are the three pillars of being super confident. Now, before we do that, I have a question for you. Well, it's more of a task, really. I want you to think of someone who you consider a great speaker. And I'll give you a little moment whilst you're doing this, but I'd love you to run a video in your mind's eye of this person you've chosen in action. And whilst you're watching them in your mind's eye, in this imaginary video in your head, I'd like you to come up with, why is it that you believe they're a great speaker? And when I do this in rooms working with my clients, I often ask this question, and I'll get all sorts of responses like, oh, they were really relaxed, or they were really confident, or they had an amazing voice. Great, these are all great things, right? But actually, from our perspective, that's really unhelpful, because it sets up this idea that people either have amazing voices or they don't have amazing voices. Whereas actually every single one of us alive on this planet with a voice box here has the potential of an amazing voice, and that's one of the things that I'm going to share with you today. So here's the thing. Everything that I just mentioned, when people come back and say, oh yeah, they were really relaxed, oh yeah, they have an amazing voice, oh yeah, they're super confident, all of these things are judgments. So then I dig with another question. And that question is, what is it they are doing? What is it they are physically doing that means you can make that judgment that they are relaxed, super confident, have an amazing voice? Once we can isolate the physical behaviors that create these judgments, then we're in a position where we can use the same behaviors to create the same result in our lives. Because, and let's think of an idea like presence and charisma, right? Most people think either, hey, I've got it, or I haven't. And because the people who have charisma typically like to disseminate the idea that charisma is somehow magical, you know, if you've got it and you're magical, then you get to decide who has it and who doesn't. That's something I often see working with my clients who are in the banking and finance space, that actually there's a man at the top of the tree making the decisions about the promotions going, well, he has it and she doesn't. Here's the truth. Anyone can have this. My first mentor, Patsy Rodenberg, head of voice at the National Theatre in London. Barack Obama's voice coach in his first presidential election campaign. I know this because I sat with her in an airport as she was about to go over and work with him, nearly 20 years ago now, right? And she said these words to me. She said, I'm off to work with this senator called Obama. The Democrats are really worried because this guy's got no charisma. This guy's got no presence. Those exact words. Now, most people find that difficult to believe when I tell them that those words were said, but they were said. And there was a time for him where he didn't have those things, but he thought to himself, oh, well, there's this job I really want to get. And if I'm going to get this job, then I'm going to have to learn the skills of how to do this. Presence and charisma are a skill. And I'm going to share one of the ways you can create a sense of presence around yourself anytime you want. And if you think that's a good idea, give me an arm in the air. Yeah, good. Superb. So, we have to get a sense of presence to begin with before we start working with the voice. Once we start working with the voice, I like to introduce this idea to you. You will have two voices, a natural voice and a habitual voice. The natural voice is the one that you were born with. You came swooping into this world, wah, making an enormous sound that, for the majority of people, as we become grown-ups, we learn how to use less and less of until we're roughly 18 and we're using about a third of our natural range in everyday conversation. Especially now, in the 21st century, when we've got all of these marvelous devices that we carry with us, that means we don't have to use our voices. Yeah? So, the last thing I am going to do with you in this free training is talk to you about energy and how you can be energized anytime you want, regardless of what's going on in your own life, how you can make sure that you are there and you're bringing the right level of energy to any conversation that you are in, regardless of whether the dog ate the homework, whether you had a sleepless night. You will be there and you will be strong and super confident. So, here we go. Number one, presence. I'm going to share with you a technique I use with every single one of my clients. It's called the Alexander technique. It's a technique that comes from the world of the theater, my home, if you like, because I worked as a professional actor and professional theater director before, so, thank you. So I'm going to share with you a technique. And this is a technique that I use with every single one of my clients. And it's a technique called the Alexander technique. It comes from the world of the theater, which is my world. It's the theater that I not exactly grew up with, but I was a professional actor. I was a professional theater director. I ran my own companies before I started working doing this that I'm doing now. So, Alexander was an actor, and he was an actor in the 18th and 19th century who toured Australia doing Shakespeare, in King Lear in actual fact. He was playing King Lear, which is, I think, the most amount of words that an actor speaks in a play in the English language. And Alexander was playing King Lear, and he was doing his show every night, and then he'd go out and he'd eat and he'd drink and he'd dance and he'd carouse, and then he'd go to bed and he'd wake up in the morning and his voice would be gone. Completely gone. So he'd then think to himself, I better not speak. So he didn't speak for the entirety of the day. Not speaking for the entirety of the day, then maybe 6, he starts to test his voice. Oh, it's come back, it's okay. 7 o'clock, he's doing some voice exercises. It's fine, it's there. He does the show, he goes out, he drinks, he eats, he dances, he sleeps. The voice is gone again. Now, can you imagine, after a few days of spending all of your daylight hours in a state of terror that you might not be able to do your job when it comes to doing your job, that he might have got sick of that. And that happened relatively quickly. And then he began to start looking at, how come this is happening? What is it that I am doing with my own body, with my own voice? And from that, he created this technique that's now used globally as a method of release. So there are many places on YouTube that you can find people going through how the Alexander technique works. It is a method of release that works through the imagination, through the creation of pictures in your mind's eye. So whilst you're watching and listening to me now, I would like you to grab a book from somewhere, and I'd like you to lie on the floor with your knees up, but the soles of your feet connected to the ground. Now, I'm going to ask you to put a book underneath your head so that the spine is flat against the floor. And once you're down there, you're going to imagine some pictures in your mind's eye. Like, for instance, I always start with this one. I'd like you to imagine, as you're lying on the floor, breathing in and breathing out, that with every exhale, the space between every vertebra in your spine extends just a little bit. Start there, just with that image in your mind. Don't try and make anything happen, but just imagine that picture in your mind's eye and let your body do what your body's going to do. Then imagine the next one, your head. Do you know how much energy human beings waste keeping their head on top of their spine? Let that head go into the book that you now have at the base of your skull. Let it go. That book is strong. The floor you're on is strong. Let it go. Let that weight of head. Imagine it's 1 ton in weight and let it go. Let it go. Imagine the tension that you hold in your shoulders. Most people have tension somewhere associated with the spine. The shoulders is a huge place for many people. You see people with their shoulders up like this walking down the street. If that's where you hold your tension, you can feel it in your shoulders. Imagine your tension is like a thick, dark oil that's now sitting on top of your skin. Because it's thick and it's dark, it's heavy, so it's now moving. It's moving, slowly but moving, around your shoulder blades, off of your shoulders, into the floor, and the floor absorbs it, and it's gone. Just take a moment to imagine that in your mind's eye. And then take each joint, starting with the elbow. Imagine that softening, first with the left, then with the right. The wrist, first with the left, then with the right. Then each joint in every single finger of your left hand. Just take a moment with those images, just with each joint. For you, take the time that you need. Once you've done the left, move over to the right with each joint. Take a moment. See it in your mind's eye. Imagine it softening. And once you've done the hands, move to the base of the spine, where the top half of the body connects with the bottom half of the body. And just imagine that spot that the two halves of you connect, softening. And because you're lying on the floor, next you will be thinking about your knees. And I'd love you to imagine that you have a piece of string coming out of both of your knees that's going all the way to the ceiling of the room that you're in, through the ceiling to the floor above, or the roof if there's a roof above. And above, you have a puppeteer who's standing there, strong, holding those pieces of string, and your puppeteer just lifts a little bit so the string becomes taut. And that puppeteer is the one who's energetically holding your knees up. Just imagine that picture in your mind's eye. And then we come to the ankles, the left, the ankle, where the foot joins the leg. Just imagine that softening, then turn to the right, and imagine that softening too. Then, the soles of the feet. Start with the left. Imagine that softening so it expands. Maybe it slightly liquefies so that it takes up more space. And then the right, exactly the same. Imagine that softening so that it expands. And then finally, we're going to go through all the toes, starting with the left, the joints where the toes connect to the feet, one by one, from the little toe to the big. And then when you've done the left, I'd like you to imagine exactly the same on the right. And then we come back to the very first image we had. With every breath in, as you exhale, the space between every vertebra in your spine extends just a little. Now, you may be thinking that you're really relaxed at this point. I'd like you to think of this as a state of release rather than relaxation. You've now released a lot of the unnecessary tension that keeps your breath high in your body rather than dropping right down into the stomach. That is going to give you a sense of presence. So slowly roll onto your side, come up to sitting, and then move into a standing position. How are you standing differently now in comparison to before you did this exercise? Now, you should be breathing in the stomach. You should have a fully oxygenated frontal lobe because you're breathing in the stomach. Now you should be ready to give your energy out and equally receive energy from the other people who you are with. Now you're in a state of presence. Number one. We can move to number two, your voice. Remember I said you've got a natural voice and a habitual voice. So I'm going to share with you how the natural voice works through the 5 resonators of the voice. So you have this range that starts really high and ends really low and has all these stopping points all on the way. So there are 5 resonators through that huge range. I'll share with you now how you can warm up your 5 resonators. Resonator number 1 is the resonator of the head. And the way to do that is to put a hand on the skull, and the other one you stick in the air. I love a visual aid when I do this exercise. And what you're going to do is take a deep breath in, right into the stomach, and as you exhale, you make this sound. Or the highest note that you can do. Yeah. Many of us avoid using the really high notes. The really high notes are where big emotions sit. So the really high notes are really useful when you are addressing large groups of people and you want them to have an emotional experience. So reach for these notes so that you can change the minds and the hearts of the people you speak to. Number 2, second resonator, is the sinus. Here, What we do is we place a hand on the sinuses and just hum through the sinuses. Just like that. Be careful if you're a little bunged up when you do that, because it makes it come out. You might want to be careful when you do that, especially if you're doing a presentation shortly after. Number 3, the lips. So we need to get the lips nice and loose, because when we do hum through the lips, we want to feel a tingle here. So just blow the lips out so that you can then tingle. Have a little tingly hum. Just gentle. It's soft. If the lips are tight, you won't feel the tingle. That's why we do this first. Like so. Now we're moving down through the range. We're getting down into the lower notes. The lower notes are often seen and heard as the notes of credibility. So we start with the throat. You can place your fingertips here on the vocal cords themselves and hum. The fifth and the final resonator, the lowest notes in the human voice, the chest resonance. And because we love the chest resonance, we're not going to hum, we're going to ah as we do our chest resonance. So take a deep breath in and ah. Very good. Very good. Super. So those are the 5 resonators of the natural range of the voice. Here's the thing. I know that this is a little left field. I know that it might feel a little silly to do. I would ask you, is it worth doing something left field so that you can have a 40% increase in the income that you bring home? You decide. If you think that's worth it, then my suggestion would be practice these, because this is how my clients change the way that they are seen and heard in the conversations they have with their bosses, in the conversations they have with their new clients. This is the stuff, the thing that makes the difference. So, what's the worst that can happen? Give it a go. So, energy is number 3 of the 3 elements, the pillars of super confidence. Energy. You know, sometimes we don't feel particularly energized, but yet we have to perform. So how do we make that happen? I did this exercise that I'm going to share with you once with a client of mine who ran a telecoms company and was consistently in a state of exhaustion. I remember that she once did a presentation. She was so exhausted after the presentation, she went home and slept for 48 hours because she was working with the wrong kind of energy. And she was getting herself all worked up for this task that made her nervous, right? So we changed the energy by focusing here, just in the stomach. Focus. Imagine that you've got a ball of energy here, just here. And it's a ball of energy that's getting a little bit hotter and getting a little bit bigger. And as it gets a little bit bigger, it's filling up the torso. And it's also firing down the legs. And it's coming down your legs, and it's coming through your feet, and it's firing through your feet all the way through the floor that you're standing on, all the way through the earth's crust, all the way through to the center of the earth, all the way through to whichever country's on the other side of the world to you right now. And all this energy starts here, and it's firing through your legs all the way to the other side of the world. And as it comes up through your torso, and it comes up through your head, and it fires all the way out of your head through the ceiling of the room that you're in, up into the sky, up out into space, all of this energy firing up from your center, right up into space, firing all the way through your feet to the other side of the world. And now it's extending through your arms, and it's coming out of your fingertips, and it's firing out, and it's going through the walls of whichever building you're in, and it's going out through the town or the space that you live in, and it's firing all the way around the country and all the way around the world, so your energy meets on the other side of the world, coming from your hands, coming through your feet and the earth's crust. And you do this, and the energy that you will be able to bring to whatever task you have will be a supreme level of energy that almost nobody else around you will be doing. So here, today, I have gifted to you 3 exercises that I know work for my clients, that I know that if you do them, will make a big difference for you. So let's have a quick recap. Posture, voice, energy. Posture. Remember the Alexander technique? Well, you can rewind and do it with my voice if you like, or you can find some other videos of people doing it on YouTube. The Alexander technique, the key to presence. A natural and powerful voice. Get those 5 resonators going. Those 5 resonators were the head, the sinus, the lips, the throat, and the chest. And let that energy extend from your center all the way around the world. Yes, these are pictures in our mind's eye. Yes, these are not real. But actually, your brain doesn't know the difference between that which is real and that which is not. That's why we imagine these pictures and things happen for us. None of this is magic. This is something that works for anybody who tries. And that's why I have gifted this for you today in this free training that it is my great honor to present to you. I'm David Roylance from Speak to Shine International. I thank you very much indeed.